I have a guy that I found when he was 19 years old. He came because he was one of the best students in the world. He got a scholarship to walk next to a CEO of an entrepreneurial company. And he came here as a 19-year-old in Indian garb with sandalwood in his head, and he'd never been in a country where it was colder than 28 degrees on a day. He came from Chennai in India. And he was breathtakingly smart, but needed some cultural adjustments. So I put him next to me, and we traveled through life together. He's now moved to Sweden. This is 6-7 years ago. But I always ask him about things because he's truly a digital native, and he teaches me a lot of things. And I asked him, so what do you want to learn from SIME? What is the lens that you're looking at when you're looking at new opportunities? Mahesh?
Numbers are fascinating. It's great to know and put context with numbers. Some examples. What happens when 1.1 billion Indians come online? Or 8.5% of all clicks goes to pornographic sites? What does that mean? And I'm very curious when you put context with numbers and when you frame business opportunities and growth with numbers.
Thank you very much, Mahesh. And that's exactly what we're going to do right now. Many of you know Comscore. It's a global leader in just understanding the numbers behind the web. So, without further ado, give it up for Greg Dale, Comscore.
Thank you. So, a tough act to follow, but I will be taking some of the topics we just kind of hit on very ethereally and put some numbers to it. And really talk today about what's the digital landscape that we're all in, what are different areas of the world, different areas of content, talk about the effect of social as we get into the digital landscape, and then how all of that gets affected by the new multi-device world we live in. Several speakers today have already hit on the changes that are happening in their business areas and competitive spaces, what's being driven by smartphones, tablets, things that are going on, and then finally, how do those things all work in concert? And hopefully, I'll be able to bring home a little bit of what it means to you as marketers, what it means to your company, or how different spaces in general will be affected. So starting off, when you look at where is the online population? The first thing you'll notice is, wow, Europe and North America, which were the leaders, are actually less than 50% of the world's online population. Now, to put that in context, when Comscore started, which wasn't that long ago, but in the digital world was a long time ago, back in 99, 2000, 2/3 of the world's internet population lived in North America. Now it's less than 15%. And when you look at what's coming next, when you think about penetration, how many people are online versus the total population, the dominance of Asia Pacific, Latin America, Middle East, North Africa are only going to get greater and greater when the additional people come online. Mobile's driving that, and just the growth of the economies in those countries. So a quick takeaway there is anyone who has responsibility for APAC or the emerging markets of LATAM, again, a lot of good things in store. They might be behind now, but they'll catch up and pass us. The numbers just prove it out. When you look more locally at Europe and what's happening with the online population, and this is where I'm looking at just PC and desktop, the answer is not much. There's not much growth happening in the traditional online PC world. A little bit of additional population coming on board, but it's mainly flat. Putting that in context of what happens in other media, you look at 4 hours, and this is a study from the UK, 4 hours a day spent on TV, little over an hour digitally, and you compare that to radio and newspapers, which are now measured in minutes. So when you think about it, it's really becoming a two-horse race as digital really becomes synonymous with, well, everything's got a digital component. So we're comparing TV and digital, and even the lines there are getting blurred. Now, when you start looking at the context of what's happening when people are online, you look at a few different figures here, and this breaks out some of the bigger categories. The big sea of blue is social networking. So you can see how that's changed and only grown over time. And then I'll pick one other one out. You look at something like portals, which used to be, again, everything. Everyone went to my Yahoo or whatever your homepage was. Portals have become less and less important to us when we think about content. Even email has not failed, and so other services haven't kept up with what's going on with social. The big picture on social is 1 in 3 minutes spent online is spent social networking. A huge stat that really affects anyone's business, whether you're trying to market through social channels or you just have to understand what's happening in social channels. That's where people are spending the bulk of their time. So really owning that, understanding that are going to be key to any strategy. Now, when I take a minute here and pivot, we've talked a little bit about landscape, where the people are, what's happening from a category or media type perspective. I'm now crossing social into mobile. When we think about that, when smartphones came out, I want everyone to take a step back and think 3 years ago, 2 years ago even, how many people would have thought about going to a bar and checking in on their phone to see what their friends were doing? Well, 3 years ago, the mobile phone or smartphone penetration levels weren't where they are today. Social wasn't quite where it is today. So that's a category that has really just emerged and is growing because of the changes in technology and what you have out there, as far as content. Look at online retail right behind it. It's something that's really grown. Again, before, it wasn't really that popular because smartphones didn't exist to the levels that it did now, so content wasn't there, et cetera, et cetera. So you really got to think about what's growing and what's going to change. When you look at what people do from a content perspective on their smartphones, I want you to look and see if there's any surprises in this list, and think about this in this context, and I'll come back to this later. Which of these categories do you think are replacing what people have done online versus which are additive? So do you think people are going to use less email because they can now access it on the phone, or just going to give them a chance to do more overall? When we talk about the changes, technologies I kind of briefly mentioned have had an effect on, when you look at online video growth, and we used to talk about that compared to TV, saying look at online video, it's really growing. And I mean that in the context of the top chart is what you're watching on your PC. That growth has slowed, and then you look at the green on the bottom, and what that's telling you is that mobile video is taking off. And that's, again, due to smartphones, and you throw in other technology factors, like the fact that a year ago, there were a couple million phones in the EU that were 4G or better. This year, there's over 18 million. So when you see an 800% growth in a category, it's going to drive something like that. So technology is now out there that you can watch video on your phone and actually be able to enjoy it. So that's something, again, a game changer. You're starting to see what's happening with mobile video, which is really going to shake up different spaces now that that's finally become a reality. And again, getting into some of the concepts I'm going to hit in the back end here, smartphones are now a majority. All the big countries in Europe now have greater than 50% smartphone populations. When you look at the rates of the phones being purchased, it's an even higher rate. So smartphones are here and they're dominant. When I flip over and look at, well, what's happening with the other largest mobile device out there, tablets, a couple quick comments is, one is tablets. When the iPad came out, I guess I'll first raise my hand and say I was one of the people who thought, wow, that's pretty cool, but what exactly are we going to do with this? I've got my phone. It's not really going to replace my phone. I've got to use my PC. So how is that going to fit in? Well, you see, tablet ownership isn't a replacement. It's more been an additive device to now. Now the jury's still out on what's going to happen in the future. Will PCs, and you see the desktop shipments going way down, be replaced by more functional tablets? Potentially. But what I can say with tablets is that you've seen a growth curve on them. In 2 years, they've done what smartphones took 7 years to do. So they're becoming real in the significant volumes. You see 14 million alone in the UK. So getting into a little bit more of the what do people do on these devices and why does it matter to you? This is an interesting chart because it doesn't talk about exactly what they're doing from a content perspective, but when they're using them. So when you think about this and think if this rings true to you, in the morning, people are checking their smartphones. They're on email, they're getting news. That's what they're doing while they're getting ready for school, for work, anything out there. During the day, PCs are dominant, people using them at work, at home, they're kind of stationary. And then in the evening, you see the phenomenon of that's what's apparently happened with tablets, is people are sitting on the couch, that's when they're using them. It's a secondary device to what's happening on TV. Sometimes it's a secondary TV screen, depending on the services. And everyone in this room should be thinking about it, especially if you're a digital media marketer or company that distributes media digitally, is are you providing content in the right format at the right time of day or making it available? Because that's how people want to consume it. And what we're seeing over and over is consumers are figuring out what they want to do and forcing companies into matching what they want to see. A couple people have mentioned the Internet of Things, today. Here are a couple stats that don't get into the real breadth of it, but just talk about some of the other types of devices that are starting to get real penetration that are connected. And again, I think in the point of today's discussion, we're thinking about how is the landscape changing and how are these numbers going to impact our businesses. Think about what used to be somewhat of a joke when we talked about internet-connected appliances. What are you going to do when your refrigerator is connected to the internet? Well, think of that in the context of what would that do if you're an FMCG company? You've used traditional channels like couponing, which maybe have gone online, or recipes to recipe sites. That could totally disrupt the category you're in based on these devices starting to get penetration and changing models of how they used to be used. The next one is trying to bring this all together, and I'm going to talk about multi-device ownership and the implications it has for marketing and for companies understanding their own customers. This is from the UK. When you look at the stats, 44 million people online, 30 million people have smartphones. You add another 13 million people that have tablets. So those are the numbers. And every company, I would guess, most of the companies I talk with, have these stats internally, and they say, okay, Greg, I know our online pop, I know how many people I have on smartphones, I'm not sure the overlap, and I'm not sure the understanding. And I'll take that back to an even better example that it was shared with me from a publisher from Latin America, so not from Europe, but it was a pretty funny conversation to me where he was explaining to me how they do internal measurement right now. And he said, look, we take our circulation numbers, which we get and they're audited. We get our web analytics numbers, which are, again, audited in that country by a digital audit company. And then we have mobile measurement from our analytics platform too. And again, he talked about those being unique users on each platform, but the really unique cookies. And he said, well, what we do then is we add those all together, and that's my total unique visitors that I reach, and that's the number we report back to the board and talk about to our advertising clients. Now, to me in our business, that made me smile thinking about, and the first question I asked, don't you think there's any overlap between any of those? And the answer was, I don't think there's much, because if people read the newspaper in the print form, they didn't go online probably. Well, we all know that's a gross overstatement of what they'd be doing. And also it has implications not only for kind of taking a Pollyannish view of how big your audience is, but from an advertising perspective, if you're talking about big numbers like that to advertisers, you're only setting yourself up for disappointment. So really starting to understand what is your total reach, or how are people interacting with you from a single consumer view across all these devices is really the new challenge that's coming about when we talk about mobile, tablets, and multi-platform device ownership. So the real number, when we talk about it in the UK context overall, was a little over 44 million. It was like 46 million, so there's not that many new people you're reaching. But the most important number to take away is that 69% of the population are reaching you through multiple devices. And really understanding that and understanding the overlap are going to be key to how your marketing programs work, to your view of the customers, to how you interact with them. It's really driven by the smartphone penetration as it's increased, as I've shown in a couple slides, and tablets at almost a third of the population now. Kind of stepping into what's happening with non-PC page views. So this is showing you in the big part of the pie that 80% of the page views still happen on PCs when you're thinking about traditional media sites. 20% happen on non-PCs, with that split between mobile and tablets. So again, there's still a lot of traffic. It's going to be that legacy effect that it'll take a while to move over to mobile. And I want to highlight here kind of what's happening by country and give you some different ranges of what's happening off PC. The UK is the bar here that shows the greatest penetration of non-PC activity. And the point I want to make that's not on the slide is that that number for the UK increased 3 times in the past year. So yes, it's the biggest of all, but it's something that has happened very rapidly as well. So the changes won't take long. Once the population, once a market starts to really go digital and mobile, you're going to see these other devices really start to drive a significant portion of the traffic. Now this is wrapping all the way back to the beginning when I was talking about some of the categories of what would happen if, is it going to cannibalize or is it going to be additive? Well, you can see down at the bottom, maps and weather are 2 good examples of categories that have really changed behavior. Thinking about how you probably accessed them before, if you were going to someone's address that you didn't know a few years ago, you might go on Google Maps, look it up, find out where it is, print out your directions and go. That doesn't really happen anymore for people that have smartphones. They're going to go on their smartphone, pop in the address, they've got it with them, they go. Weather, it's ubiquitous on all phones now, and what's happened is traffic has fallen off on PCs. A couple examples from a ComScore perspective, some of the biggest clients we work with, if we reported PC-only numbers back to Facebook, we'd be showing them as not growing because the PC traffic for them is pretty flat and all their growth is coming through mobile. These are ones where you start to see big changes and sometimes content being swapped out and sometimes being additive. So it's really important to understand in terms of your category, is this going to be a swap? Is it something that we can make it be additive or will it naturally be additive? Again, big implications on the overall opportunities to reach your consumers or have a conversation with them. And from a perspective, from a digital marketing point of view, it has some real implications if you are miscounting these numbers, besides just from reporting something that you shouldn't be to your advertisers or overestimating what's going on with the big counting is, the second point I have, undercounting. And how does that make sense when I have overcounting as number 1 and undercounting as number 2? The real issue there is when you think about it on a person basis, most people have some type of customer segmentation where they're going to look at their heavy users, their loyal users, and really want to understand them. If I've got a loyal user, real heavy user, and all of a sudden he goes out and buys a tablet, and I don't know it's him on this tablet, he's going to look like a new user, a light user, someone that I don't care about. So I'm going to undercount how much time people spend online on average and not really understand how people are interacting with me. I might think some of my strategies are failing. Finally, I could get into miscounting when, again, I'm not taking into account how they're coming in from all the different devices. That same user who I didn't understand was the guy on the tablet that is also a heavy user, he actually came over and bought something because I had a great social marketing program. But since I couldn't tie him back, I misattributed a big purchase that was made and gave myself no credit to that social media campaign because he reacted on a different device. So that's the real implication you get into. So to wrap it up with an example for one of the players here in the Europe that has really used this multi-platform understanding to drive their strategy. Virgin Media had to understand how they interacted with their customers on set-top box, on their mobile phones, online, across all these, as they were spending billions of pounds to develop their strategy of how do they want to deliver content, how do they want people to interact. And it was really core to them understanding what do they invest in, what are they going to do to move forward. So some takeaways from today, I would summarize it with one. The multi-platform understanding is something that everyone has to have. It's affecting your business today. It's not something, as we've talked about, mobile coming forever. This is something that's here now. 69% of your customers are interacting with you through multiple devices. So there's plenty more on the website to follow up. We'll post the presentation for those of you who are looking for some of the stats, and be happy to follow up with anyone on questions and measurement worldwide. Thank you.